when you see what's happening now too, because I'm in Europe at the moment, I'm in the UK, they're facing a vicious winter, and so are the Germans. And the Swiss announced yesterday or the day before that they would put people in prison for up to 3 years if they turned their thermostats above 66 degrees. 3 years in jail. And all of this is coming out of this idiot ESG and its subsidiary DEI woke morality. And we're starting to put people in real danger here. The Chancellor of Germany, who's a leftist, Olaf Scholz came to Canada, cap in hand, about 3 weeks ago and said to Trudeau, do you think you could open up the LNG pumps, so to speak? And Canada has massive reserves of natural gas, and natural gas is a very, very clean energy source, high density, clean energy source. I mean, the Americans started fracking for natural gas in a big way back around the turn of the millennium, and they cut their carbon output. And this is relevant to Vivek's point about what are we trying to accomplish here? The death of Western civilization or saving the planet. The Americans cut their carbon output by 15% by turning to fracking. And Canada could have, over the last decade, invested heavily in liquid natural gas production and movement and then shipping. We have the technical ability to do it and to do it cleanly. And then we could have provided Europe with an alternative energy source that was clean and efficient. They're going to turn back to burning coal here right away. They're already doing that in Germany. And anyways, Olaf Scholz, who's one of Canada's great allies, let's remember that, came to Trudeau, one of his fellow left-wingers, and said, man, we could sure use some gas here since we're Putin's serf and slave because we set ourselves up to be that. And Trudeau said, well, we don't think we can make a business case for that. And the reason he couldn't make a business case for that is because his bloody, appalling administration has done everything they possibly could have to make it absolutely impossible for energy company to make a business case for it, because it's become so expensive and so difficult to do business in Canada on the energy front that no one's willing to risk the investment. You can't make this stuff up. It's beyond comprehension. This is at the same prime minister who's spouting off at every moment his ritual adherence to the support for the brave people of Ukraine, but he's still willing to put all the power in the hands of Putin, who is much more masterful, as far as I can tell, at the moment, at the use of arbitrary power than any of the opponents he faces in the West. Means he's already put the screws to Europe, and just wait till the winter comes. If you think you've seen screws so far, man, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Winter is coming to Europe, no doubt about it. And you know what? Putin's making a historical bet here. I mean, if you're putting yourself in his shoes, what are you going to say? Russia has a long history of outlasting its European opponents through long, cold winters. They're not going to be able to muster the political power through this winter when they lack enough energy to actually heat their homes. And you got to think about, it's not just Trudeau. I mean, you look at this from the Canadian perspective. As a Canadian, I think you're spot on. I'll also make a very similar observation as American about President Biden, who, with one hand, is giving $45 billion in aid to Ukraine to fight against Putin. On the other hand, the number one lobby against the European ban on Russian oil imports was actually the US White House, who was actually President Biden, which is in turn financing Putin's war machine that in turn allows him, the one thing that's gone well for Russia, of course, is its oil and gas sales going up since its invasion of Ukraine. So with one hand giving $45 billion to Ukraine, with the other hand lobbying against a policy that has the effect, in turn, of increasing Putin's cash machine to finance his war machine.
Yeah, well, let's not forget cozying up to the Iranians at the same point.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's a fun little side effect. And also alienating the Saudis at the same time while he's doing that.
If this is bad economically, if this is bad geopolitically, then why is it happening? And at the end of the day, it's that the small handful of actors who have benefited, both politically and economically, they wield so much aggregated capital, including capital aggregated from every citizens across Western nations. They are actually the ones who are able to influence all of these decisions because it's in their self-interest. That sounds conspiratorial, but it's hiding in plain sight. And this is not a left-wing or a right-wing debate. This is a question about whether you believe in the distributed power, both distributed political power and distributed market power, that we set into motion in 1776, the year of the Declaration of Independence, the year of the Wealth of Nations. Both of those people forget were both in 1776. Is that what we believe? Or do we believe in the old world European model where a small group of enlightened elites decide the right answers to how society is to organize its affairs for the rest of society at large? At the end of the day, that has now reared its head again in the 21st century version of this, in what's at stake in the ESG movement, is the debate between distributed power through a democracy, distributed power through actual decentralized free market capitalism, or the new version of monarchy. And this is not a left-wing actually agenda, it is a monarchical agenda.
That's the sort of thing that Russell Brand keeps objecting to, because in some sense he's an objector on the left. And what he's fundamentally objecting to is monarchical pretensions on the part of gigantic corporations rather than gigantic government actors. But a common enemy, as you just pointed out, or a common threat, I would say, is unconstrained gigantism, period. It doesn't matter whether it's on the corporate front or the government front. And it's relevant to this issue of the fundamental debate that you see going on here, is that too much centralized control constitutes a catastrophe in and of itself. It doesn't matter if it's corporate or governmental. And
That's
it's
right.
the same problem. And the problem is the Tower of Babel problem, essentially, which is you have one centralized authority who has all the responsibility and all the power, and everyone else is turned into a voiceless peon. And that means the centralized authority turns into a tyrant, partly because they get dissociated from the populace, and all of the intermediary structures of responsibility that should be there as an antidote to that totalitarian structure are wiped out, are demolished. And then you have the moral hazard that all accrues benefit, at least in the short term, to the people who are wielding the power and accruing the moral virtue. It's utterly appalling.